Ooh, 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 ooh. It's Monday. It is Monday morning. And I already had my coffee, so I can't have some coffee on stream. Ooh, wow, 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 wow. My nose is a little clogged up. It's a little clogged up. Alright. What can we figure out today? Where's my document? There. Right. I think this should be even easier than this. This should be if... What is this called? Tile to right Q dot count is greater than 0. Then we run this. That way it's completely self-contained and we don't have to deal with any bullshit. It just handles itself. This is now length. And this now just straight up contains the entire tile data. So we're no longer baking anything here or doing any of this shit here. Not sure. I'm not fully convinced. Man, it's so stupid. Like, oh my god. I don't understand how it's still like this. Like, it's so dumb. I even wrote about this on GitHub as a complaint, and they were like, no, it should be like that. Like, fuck you. Like, if I'm... We have the struct tile data to write here. It begins with an uppercase T. That's how you do it usually, right? Like, it's a struct, it's a class, you write it with uppercase... I don't know what it's called. Is that camel case? And then the actual value is snake case? Or... No, it's not snake. Okay, so... This is camel case. And the class itself is just uppercase. Pascal case. Oh my god, it's so stupid. So, right, so I start typing tile data with lowercase, which means I want the variable, obviously, because it starts with the lowercase. If I wanted the uppercase, I would start uppercase. But it just suggests the uppercase one first. It's so fucking stupid. And it's also like, just practically, it also doesn't make sense. Because it's like, this is in the scope. Like, this is literally like what I'm working with. This has nothing to do with it. Like, okay, I want to struct, like, okay, maybe. Like, this should obviously take precedence. This is something that's been annoying me for years. Like, it's so dumb, and you run into it constantly. It is so fucking annoying. But yeah, let's see here. The tile data to write queue is in the world controller. So the idea is now that we are simply creating an array of compute tiles, and we're writing it right here. Yes. I am just worried that this might lead to some issues, but I think it's fine. Because I'm just thinking, okay, like, if we're queuing this up, what happens if a tile change gets queued up, and then after this gets queued up with the building, roof, room numbers all set here? What happens if the room number changes as, you know, in the same frame? Then it becomes like weird and doesn't update. That's my concern. But we'll come back to that if it happens. Now, the light source list. This is now different. We don't have these. Just thinking, like, do I need to have these? for any reason. No, Gibbs. I don't know. We just started. I don't know. We'll see. I think it's going well though. I'm just trying to get back my head into it for today again. Usually it takes a few minutes to wrap your head around where you were. I'm just thinking, because they've changed how the light is handled, so that now objects need to add themselves to the light area list into the hash sets. But there's no way to like access all of the lights in an easy way. But I'm just thinking if there is any reason to need to do that, and I kind of think there isn't. Because it doesn't matter anymore in any way. Unless it's for like accessing the like light sources, so you can like alter it in some way how the game is running. But I feel like you would just do that per object in the scene. I think we'll just get rid of that. Then get rid of those errors. No error there. We can leave those still. Here we're sorting light lists. This shouldn't be a thing anymore. And that has now reduced this to only these two errors. This is a shader set, which... This isn't really an issue. I'm just leaving it here so I can find it again and remember what's happening. Because this probably needs to be moved somewhere else. Or maybe not. Set float light area size. Isn't that weird? Why is it a float? But I don't think this is actually that weird. This one makes sense. Light area map size. And light area size, though, this should just be set once on creation. Like, yeah, this shouldn't be here. This should be, like, here in start. And only be set once. Here, light area size, it's set there. And that's an integer here right now. Let's move that over to global variables. Light area size, there. It should actually just be an int. And just set it to 12. maybe. And that would mean 12 tiles. This doesn't need a getter. Light area size. It just needs to be public, static, read-only. I don't know why I made a summary for that, that's so obvious. So then we just do that. Global variables light area size is read-only, static read-only. And we just set that once here, that's it. Then we don't need to have this here. Light area map size. Now this though, this actually is relevant. World area size. However, that doesn't matter. That doesn't need to be set. Like, it can be. But this is a simple calculation. Compute world index container. I don't know. I'm gonna comment that out for now. And make a note. Maybe set world area size for lights through set in shader. Reset tile buffer. Hmm. What's it called? It's an immutable structured buffer. Should I simply recreate the buffer, or do I overwrite the data using my byte address buffer? Right. Staging buffer. Immutable means write once at creation. Oh, okay. Let's see. Structured buffer unity. Compute buffer type. Compute buffer. Compute buffer mode. Immutable. Yeah. Let's see. I'm just I have this thing here called reset tile buffer where we before I was like overwriting the entire buffer with like zeros basically. But I don't know if it's easier to just we just do something like this. We say recreate, then we say recreate with an int count, int stride, and then we have a public void recreate core, which takes int count and an int stride. And then we say here, this calls recreate core, and it takes count and stride internally. And here we just say recreate core with count and stride. And then here we're gonna say buffer equals new compute buffer count stride compute buffer type compute buffer mode, and then that's it. And then we have a way to recreate and empty out the buffer if needed. Which I don't know if it's needed. But we can. Actually, we have to do buffer.release here first. Like that. However, I don't think this is really needed. I mean, it maybe it is a bit, right? It's actually not that simple either. Because here we're doing set data here. Hmm. Hey Splunky, how's it going? Hmm. I think I don't want to do this. Hmm. Hmm. I should write a small shader script. Let's see. Create compute shader. Clear buffer. And then we should just have a read-write structured buffer. No. Is this possible? What? Let's see. basically what I want to do is I want a generalized function inside of like a separate shader that I can just run by feeding in a count and a stride, and then it will use that to simply set everything in the entire buffer to zeros. Because otherwise, if you recreate a buffer and you don't set it, then it's going to be undefined. Which is not ideal. Where's my other shader? So here we have a bunch of structured buffers like this. The same underlying compute buffer can be bound as different buffer types in different shaders. Okay, so it's super easy. You just do read write byte address buffer. Just say buffer. We don't need a texture result. And all we're gonna do here then is we set this to 64, 1. We do need to take an integer, int count, int stride, right? So then we can say buffer id.x equals 0, or read write buffer does not have an indexer. Oh. store. Is that what you do? Store. That's one value to a uint address. Store. ID x 0. But the stride yeah, we need a uint byte offset. Uint byte count. Equals id.x times 4 if byte offset is greater than or equal to byte count, and we return byte offset set to 0. And the uint count is then clear buffer. We're gonna need to assign it here somewhere. Shader. Object C shader. C shader. Or C shader. There. Then we need a public compute shader clear buffer shader. And in here we say public void clear buffer. Main controller dot control dot clear buffer shader dot set buffer 0 buffer buffer. Then we say set int byte count this doesn't need a kernel. So the byte count is then count. I'm not sure. I'll be right back. Ooh. Okay, so I figured it out. It's just count times stride. That's it. That's what the stride is. The stride is the amount of integers in the data type, so it's just count times stride. Um, and then we do a main controller dot control dot clear buffer shader dot dispatch. Now this one is a little bit... What should the thread groups be? The thread groups should be int byte count equals count times stride divided by 4. Because this is actually an int count. So if we divide it by 4, we get the amount of bytes. And then the dispatch should be per byte. But yeah, it has to be a seal. Mathf seal to int byte count. Wait, hold on. Am I stupid? The ID should be per integer. Hold on. Int count. Hello, Mr. 123. Yeah, I would win. And then the byte count is int count times 4. This doesn't make sense. It needs to be... was recently involved in an industrial accident while working on fissionable material. What happened to doing, like, computer repair, dude? I feel like that's a big step away. I need more power to repair the computers. Fair enough. Fair enough. Oh my god. But I feel like this should just be byte count times 4. I mean, it should just be an int count. And then just set the int count. And then here we should just say int count. Divided by 64. One. Oh? Like, am I done? Let's see. And then it's this here. No, this one. And we have an int count. And then the byte offset. Because that's what's so weird here. It's storing an integer. So that means we're not writing an integer, or we're not writing a byte. Which means that the address doesn't make sense to only write a byte either. Or is it just that it takes... What is this shit? The critical thing is that store writes 4 bytes per call. Yeah, so the byte address... Is this one of those things that doesn't work in theory but does in practice? No, it works in theory and in practice. We just need to figure it out. It's a little misleading because it's called a byte address buffer, and then here in the store command it says uint address, uint value, the input address in bytes, which must be a multiple of 4. But so that just means that it's an integer. And it takes an integer, but it's like a byte. It says byte address, but it's actually on an integer level. It must be a multiple of 4. So it is taking an integer, but it's actually a byte. It's a byte index. Fuck. Right, so it's basically we access byte fuck. It writes 4 bytes per call. Okay. It can only write 4 bytes at a time. But you need to access it via a byte index. So it's if you access it at 0 and you write to 0, it writes to 0, 1, 2, 3. And if you access it at 1, it will write to 1, 2, 3, 4. So you need to access it at 0, and then you access it at 4. So that's why we need to have a byte count. And each X should be... Each X should still be an integer. I mean, Okay, okay. So... yeah, this needs to be int count, because here... No. No, this should be byte count. It should be byte count. And we should dispatch it as integers. Yes. And this should be byte count, which is then int times 4. Yeah, I think that should be right. And then this here... recreate. I feel like this should be called resize. But then this should also say this dot count equals count. This dot stride equals stride. Hello, chair. How's it going? Something like that. And then here we have reset tile buffer. So here we now just say clear buffer instead. And what we'll also do is in start, wherever we are setting everything here, we're setting compute shaders, compute. And it says set buffer. This should now be super easy. To the point of we can initialize them manually ourselves. But I think once you set it to immutable here, you create it here. Then it's allowed one set data. I'm alright. The gym kicked your teeth in? Damn, bro. Maybe it's time for a rest day. Rest dates are Friday to Sunday? Damn. Resting too much, man. Just... Ooh. You're doing good. Big, strong, metallic chair. Big, strong, muscly chair. Made of zinc. That's the structural integrity of zinc. Hmm. Very poor. Fair enough. Mm-mm. What? Okay, so what? So the immutable compute buffer mode that is supposed to be immutable and you can't write to it from the CPU is actually mutable and you can write to it from the CPU. Oh. Okay. Let's see. What is the source on that? Compute buffer mode is not really meant for external users to change. While the default value in the constructor is called immutable, the name is a huge misconception. What it actually means internally is basically as a buffer in OpenGL would work, so everything goes. The dynamic and others are for internal things like keeping mesh in CPU accessible memory, etc. If we really twist the wording of the docs, compute shaders and other GPU operations are allowed to modify the contents of the buffer. Well, upload operations is a GPU timeline operation performed by GPU, so yeah, set data works just fine. Oh my fucking god, bro. Oh. Well, it's still because it's like this close. to meaning that all of the stuff that I wrote for the last few days was like meaningless. But it's actually not. It's still worth having. So it's not that bad. But it's also not as necessary anymore. Basically, the idea is something like this. If we're gonna write it up here. So here you have a wall in the middle. And over on the left, we have the CPU. And the CPU has memory, basically. Which is, I don't know, RAM, whatever the fuck, I don't know really how it works exactly. Then over here you have the GPU, right? And then you have buffers, which is like memory that you can store. So you can have like arrays and shit. Array. Or you have an array here on the array, you have a list on the CPU side. That's all like handled very dynamically. But on the GPU you have buffers, which is basically just rows of bytes. Bytes after bytes after bytes. And I don't know if I'm gonna make any sense here. But basically, these live entirely on the GPU. Or on the CPU here. So the GPU cannot access them at all. The GPU cannot read this. And the buffer can live entirely on the GPU, in which case it will just read it. But the buffers can also exist in shared memory. So this is a shared buffer. And the difference here is that if the buffer exists only in GPU memory, the GPU can just read it on its own, and they're like, these two are separate entities. But if you have a buffer that exists in shared memory, that means that whenever the GPU needs to access this, it stalls the CPU. The CPU needs to wait for the GPU to finish reading this. And because of that, it is a tremendous slowdown. And that's what I'm basically trying to avoid. Because this is what in Unity is supposed to be a sub-updates buffer. And this is an immutable buffer. Immutable, whatever. So an immutable buffer means that once it has been set on the GPU, you can't change it from here because the CPU doesn't have access to it. However, the way it actually works, apparently, is that it's still true. This buffer is not accessible by the CPU. But the way you write the data in the first place is called set data. And set data doesn't actually access the buffer. It literally tells the GPU to write the data to the buffer. So technically, set data isn't actually accessing the buffer from the CPU side. It's just like sending it to the GPU that then writes it. So it's doing exactly what I have just implemented with my byte address buffer, which takes in raw data as bits and bytes, and then just like writes it in place into the other buffers. So it already does that automatically. So there's no real such thing as like an inaccessible buffer here. So it doesn't really matter. And that simplifies a lot of stuff, really. But it's still... So you reinvented the wheel while on the rolling wagon? Yeah, more or less, except that the wheels on the wagon are, like, hidden. And you're blindfolded. The diagrams are crazy. Yeah. But, what... so, what I've written is a way to take the data from here, like the list. You send it in here as just zeros and ones, zeros and ones, zeros and ones, right? 0, 0, 0. And then you write it into a section in this buffer. It can be there, it can be here. But that is still valuable because the tile buffer, for example, is massive. Because each tile has like this amount of data, let's say. Like, let's say that's a tile. And then you have hundreds and thousands of tiles. That way it's very practical to be able to just like, oh, I'm gonna update like these 10 tiles. Because otherwise with set data, I would have to update like all of them or do some other bullshit. Because there's something called like start write, which lets you write to like a segment. And that's kind of what I've done here. But I think that's still not like a waste of time. But that also means that the staging buffers, shouldn't be sub-updates. They should also just be immutable. Okay, so these should just be immutable. I don't think it actually matters, but... very interesting. This also just immutable. Let's just say sub-update, see if we find anything that is set to that. No. Dropped out of full-time education to watch Robin streams. Yeah. Honestly, learning programming in school is like the hardest thing in the world. It's so ass. I could barely do it. Like, it was bad. I did not enjoy that. We were doing C++, but it's still just the worst place to learn how to program in the world. Like, if you were ever to ask my advice on like a programming education, I would never say go to school to learn it. I would say learn it at home, just doing fun little projects. It doesn't even take a lot of time to learn it. Like, you could learn almost as much in terms of practical programming that you would in like 3 years at uni in just a few months. Like, easily. It's just that whenever you go to uni for programming, it's going to teach you like infinity other things. And it's basically like learning those things is much easier if you already know programming, which is easy to learn. Programming is easy to learn. All the bullshit is hard to learn. And then they're gonna make you write papers and shit, which is ass. And then it's like mainly for the certificate and like learning, like I guess not background, but like under the hood technicalities. Barriers to entry was my tutors improved massively with peers online. Yeah, I mean, just being able to go online and just go into like some, like a C# chat room or something and just ask a question makes it a lot easier. And it's just more enjoyable to just be able to program whatever you want and just learn your way. And just practical programming or practical learning is just generally always better. But it is important to actually like go to uni if you want a programming job outside of like freelancing, because it is important to learn industry practices, right? Like that's a big deal. That's a very big part of being a programmer, because there's a lot of teamwork, and if you don't know what the industry practices are, then you're just going to step on everybody's toes constantly. But even so, every team is going to have different stuff. Bunky said, so is this getting close to bare metal programming? Almost machine code level? No, this is just working with bits and bytes a bit. Like, all I'm doing is my buffers all have some kind of data type, which is a struct, right? So my object data has a vector 3, a float, and a color. And then you just look at, okay, what's a vector 3? It's actually 3 floats. And a float and an integer is the same size. It's the same, it just works the same. It just translates to bytes and bits. Same with float, it's just one. A float is just 32 bits, right? A color is 4 floats. So this is 128 bits, right? Yeah. So you can see here, this struct has a static size of function that just grabs size of float, and then I just manually write in like the amount of 32-bit entries here. And then the buffer gets created, because the buffer is an array. It's the same, it's almost the same thing, except that the array specifically wants a data type, while the buffer only cares about the bytes. But it can also be like assigned a data type, just because that's just how it is, because it makes it easier to understand and work with. And that way you can write to and like overwrite certain segments of the array, right? So like say that the color here is four, it's like 4 floats. So that's, one float is 4 bytes. So it's what, 16 bytes in total for this color thing. So if you just want to change like the alpha of a color on an object, as long as you can just access the correct index of the object, all you can just write to the colors like byte segment, as long as you just know in which order everything comes, and that way you can update it that way. And I implemented that because it lets you update like the tile buffer, because it contains every single tile all in one go, and it's better to be able to update the tiles in as uninvasive a way as possible, instead of like having to rewrite every single tile. but yes. Enter combat mode. Camera target. What is this? Progress turn. This is main world dot camera target character equals current turn dot unit. Disable dynamic grid. This shouldn't be this way. Reset dynamic grid. Yeah, I haven't really decided how to handle this yet. It works the way I'm doing it. This is a way to highlight the tiles. So basically, we're setting a start position and we're setting a size of the grid area. But that means that the grid area is dynamic, right? Like, it can be 1 tile, it can be 100 tiles in size. And that makes it a little difficult to write to a buffer. Like, not really, but kind of. Because then the question becomes, how big should the buffer be? Because what if this selection is the entire map? Then the buffer needs to be able to handle the entire map being highlighted. And at that point, you might as well just add like a is highlighted thing to the tile itself. But if I do that, like I add another integer to the tile data, then it grows in size by like 500 megabytes. So that's not good. But the highlight could also potentially be hidden in one of the integers in the tiles that already exist by baking it in bitwise somewhere in one of the integers that don't use up so much of its range. And that way we could simply have tile highlight data be hidden in the tile itself instead of needing to bother with extra grid buffers and stuff. But I think it's fine the way it's working right now. It's just that it's a little shitty, because every time I create a selection, I have to release and recreate the buffer, and then it gets uploaded to the GPU, and... But I think it doesn't matter. Like, I think that's fine. Count stride. There we just resize it. And then we set the data there. Manager dot buffer. And same thing here. Dot resize. Wait, what the fuck? Reset grid. I don't think we need to do that. Why would I reset the grid? That's stupid. It should just say C shader dot set static grid. If draw tile grid. Get tile dynamic highlight state. Our C++ teacher in high school also made us write out code on paper for exams. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. It's one of those things, like, school sucks, but they also need to actually grade you. That's why, like, you have to write the papers and shit, but I always feel like they are, like, very poorly made. Like, when I went to uni, we wrote a C++ game, which was an MS-DOS casino. Or we wrote two. One was a casino, and the other one was a battleships game. And the code was literally like 1 page long. It was almost nothing. And then they wanted us to write 10 pages about the code. And I'm like I couldn't manage. I literally dropped out. like that's retarded. Like, what do you want? I hate that. Like, that's one part of school that is just actually stupid. Because it's so unnecessarily, like, that part is just like, what are we doing? Like, it's just bad. There's no reason why papers need to be as long as they are. It's just unnecessary. It's unnecessary, stressful, doesn't help, doesn't do anything worthwhile. It's just ass. Like, even 5 pages would have been almost too much for that. But that would have been like, okay, 10 pages, ridiculous. Our final year of C++, we had to write a random number generator and compile it. Okay. Conclusion, it just works. Yeah. It's so basic too. It's like, yeah, I used an if statement here, and you know, like what am I supposed to write? Like, it's just if statements. It's just like if else, and like a for loop. Like, what am I supposed to write about that? I used an integer because I didn't want it to be an inaccurate value. Like, fuck you. Let's not mess around with this that much right now. Let me write a note. Static and dynamic highlight grids should not resize themselves to 0. They should simply be set to not draw. They should also have empty data in them, and we should just read from it if we render in the highlight rectangle. Performance impact for optimization is negligible. Yeah. So we can leave that as an error. It makes it easier to come back. Finalize dynamic highlight grid. Release length manager dot resize. Resizing it is fine. But let's actually do resize. Yeah, some of these old things are simply a little bit more overcomplicated than they need to be. What is this? This is the path. Draw movement grid path. This one, I'm not entirely sure. But it works mostly the same. But it would be the absolute best if I could just bake all of this shit into the tile itself, which I might be able to do, but I don't want to do that right now. Let's figure that out later if we want to do that. It doesn't really matter because it works. Let's not get too caught up on it. But I did add a lot of tiles to, or a lot of data here to compute tile data. Right? It's got tile type, detail data, tile state, tile data. Tile data already is packed, so we don't want to use that one really. But tile type, I think, is very, very open. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it is very open to being written to. So is actually building IDs. I think building IDs literally is just like an integer. It contains like 1 to 20 at most, I think. Or 0 to 20 even. So there is definitely room here to write highlighting. And the way it should be handled then is that it shouldn't be like, oh, does this have a pathfinding highlight? Does it have a whatever? It should just be an integer that says like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I don't know how many we would have. Maybe like 8. That way we have 8 different highlight variants. And then inside of the shader, we're just gonna create a lookup table that just says, if it says that it's highlight number 1, that means it's this blue, and that's it. Then it just highlights it into that blue. And that would be 100 times easier than all of this bullshit. The only thing would be that I would need to update the tile with that data. But that's not that big of a deal, I think. It's a little annoying to write, but it's not that big of a deal. Hull damage pop-up. This needs to be different. Hull damage pop-up needs to not be Unity objects. We need to write that through the shader. But that's going to be an annoying little trip, so I don't want to do that right now. Dual scene base. This is different now. The dual scene needs to be rewritten. What is this? Count. World container.rooms.count. Compute building transparency array. Okay. I think that works. Get mouse tile position is apparently... This is not really a thing anymore. The main controller cannot have a mouse position. What is this used for? Check cursor. If editor mode. This generates colors. This is for the editor only. I'm just thinking. It's just structured so incorrectly right now, unfortunately. Uh, this is for the level editor, so you can see when it's hovering over something. Now, I think we should just set the mouse position. Just the value fetched from Unity. Because what's happening here is that before everything was kind of handled in the same place, but now I'm shifting away from that. So basically, the main controller doesn't have a mouse position. Like all that the main controller can have is the window mouse position. And then that needs to just be used to translate into world space in any of the worlds or in the scenes. Which is easy, but that's just it. So are any of these things action to trigger, target type, mouse tile size? Do any of these things actually matter for action to trigger? Yeah. So this one, the mouse position doesn't matter, but the mouse tile position does. And This is at the end of update mouse. The world controller. Holy shit. It's just that some of the oldest sections of the code are like an unholy hybrid between my own system and Unity. It's a little hard to wrap my head around where things are done. But if we go to render, here we are rendering entities. Re-render. And if entities are rendered here, this is where the world is rendered. So here we have some world index stuff. It should be set here, I think. Like the mouse tile size can be set here. Sure, update mouse. We have an adjusted mouse position, which is set to the tile, halfway point of the tile. Mouse position. Trigger. Mouse controller. Mouse position equals main controller dot camera position. This is exactly what I did yesterday evening in the other project. And this needs to actually kind of work in the same way. Yeah, it's just the mouse script is pretty fucking big, right? And the issue is that it should... You have UI, right? You have the game. I don't know what the game looks like. Game looks like that. It's got some grass and shit. Hooray. Grass. But then you also have UI. UI looks like this. Maybe it's got some shit here. It's got a menu here. Then you also have... You have characters. Look like that. And then you have health bars, which I'm not sure if the health bars should be above or below. I think I actually prefer below, but we'll see. Or if they should be toggleable, or dynamic, or all of the above. Right? And then maybe there even there's like a special window here. Let's make it skin colored. Now let's make it blue. Here you have a special window. It's special for whatever reason. So the way it should work, thank you. So the way it should work, the way I set it up yesterday, is that wherever the mouse is, you have to run through everything in order. So if I am to click like here, which would maybe it creates like a selection or something, tile selection. It should first check all of these windows here. Because this is a special window that you can move around. So it needs to check that. But it misses that. And then it needs to check the static UI. Can we click that? No, it misses that. Then it needs to check... It doesn't need to check objects. It depends on what the current tool is. Is it just a selection tool, or is it like a movement tool? Because if it's a movement tool, then it doesn't really need to check the characters. It just needs to check if it's a valid movement position, and then it can check against that. But this sequence is not quite so stable right now. And the reason for that is because the UI is a hybrid Unity abomination. In the UI here we have like gauges and stuff like that. And because of that, it's become a little weird. I really hate the Unity UI system. It's not that bad. It's just that there are so many settings in Unity that they like don't feel like they make sense. It's very hard to understand what like half of the things mean in the canvas, for example. I feel like, at least. Green space, overlays, green space, camera, world space, lane distance. Yeah, no. I don't know. My brain is pooped. It has been 2 hours. Which is what happens after 2 hours. But if we go here, this is update mouse. Where do we actually do the mouse checks for the UI? Mouse mode. Update mouse. It's not in update mouse, which is a little like, what the fuck? Mouse origin. Mouse mode. Mouse tool. Mouse point. Mouse targets. Mouse target size. Get mouse input. Check mouse. Check mouse right button. I think it's check mouse. So here we do get mouse input. Does all kinds of bullshit. Check mouse hover. Check mouse. Okay. So, if active window does not equal null, then we try to trigger the window. And that's like having a character screen open. Like there's one active window so that you can't clutter the screen with windows. And then we have soft windows. And soft windows are more like the start, or no, the attack, the action, the wait, little menu, and if you click that, it opens up another soft window, which is the command list. Those are soft windows. And if that, so we go through that, and then we go to mouse tool.trigger, which then goes into the tool and triggers this. So that's actually almost okay. But I think trigger should take a world. Which I want to change it to scene. I want to rename this to scene. But because we have like 5,000 errors, I'm afraid to do it because it's gonna break the rename. But this should take main world. World controller. And in reality, the way this should work is that before we reach here, we should be able to... We should check the prefab editor. I think that's really all that's missing here. And then once we enter the mouse tool, that means we are interacting with the world. So all we really need to change here is anything that sets the camera position. Or here we set the mouse position. It says main controller. This needs to be world.camera.camera position. And here we have a controller.editor mode. This is now main controller. .ax. Main controller.editor mode. Why is there a static bool? Public static bool. Member editor mode cannot be accessed with an instance reference. Why the fuck not? Public static bool. Editor mode. But why is it a static bool? Instead of just a public bool. I don't know. And then here, we're now accessing tile matrices. This is where world comes in. And all of these need to pass on the world controller world. Yeah, I would say. And then we have world, tile matrix, world, 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 world. Let's put this in these.
This song slaps, that's true. What is this from? Chrono Cross. The only good thing about Chrono Cross. Well, the art style is kind of nice too. Check if tile in world. That needs a world. Some of the girls are cute. Fair enough. Strong argument. Cannot argue with you. Acquire AoE targets. And now what is this? Alright, mouse controller seems to be fixed. Mouse tool needs to take a world, but it is the main world. Check right mouse button. Yeah, sure. Enter combat mode. Add to object list. Combat background object. This is simply wrong. This should be background object is the combat arena. Should simply exist in combat world. Should it be tiles? Question mark. Because it could be tiles. Sure. And this error, static grid matrix. Okay, I think the main controller is actually like pretty much resolved. This issue here. Sure, we can do this. I think this is stupid, but sure. It does work for now. Can we... Yeah. Light area size. Ah, yes. Can we just focus on anything that isn't in the shader right now? Dynamic light source. It really doesn't do this anymore. These remove static light list. These don't really exist anymore. Oh, managed to find some more errors. Add to static light list. Create object core. Yeah, this is now tremendously simplified. We don't need to do any of this. And honestly, I think I should be doing... Entity list, object list. Fuck. Such an abomination. Where's my object? See, here we do have an ID. But I don't think I've implemented a way to handle the ID. But we're gonna implement the same method as we're using in the other project. So I don't know where to fucking put this. Public int total of... Wait, hold on. No, I was already implementing this. Object pool. Here we have the object master list. It takes an int. It's the object pool. I new object I. New object takes an ID. This is wrong. Let's do what I'm doing in the other project here. And we're gonna just say new object. And instead of ID, there is going to be a counter in here. That says public int total object count equals 0. And then in the object constructor, we're gonna say ID equals main controller dot. How can you access main controller? There we go. Main controller dot total object count plus plus. That way, every single time that I create an object, it is granted an ID. And the objects are never destroyed, they are just pooled. That way we can always track it. And see, I am doing that here, right? Sorted list object. And here we're adding object pool. So we'll say object pool.id. But this isn't necessary because the object should just add itself to the master list when it is created. Main controller dot master object master list dot add ID this. And that's just how it should be. I think this one might be obsolete. I have too many constructors. Okay, what's going on in here? Handle light source. Yeah. That's gonna suck a bit, but yeah, we have to do that. Wait, did I already program this? What is happening here? IVEC. Position min area. Area count.
Yeah, this here, the data module light size. This should be a float. Because before I was setting the size of the light to basically be at like a tile-based integer, and I was also keeping myself within a certain value, like, oh, I don't want them to be bigger than this because then it'll break the code, but that's no longer the case. So if we set that to light size, what's this? Get set is inherited, okay. So the position here cannot convert from float to int. Position min. So then light size should be size in wait, it could still be in integers. Maybe it would still be better as integers. Okay, so much for that. So that way we can take our current position minus the light size in pixels, and that determines the min and max x and y and z. Static light source matrix, add this. And these should be hash. Wait, no, this is wrong. It is the world controllers matrix, but it should not add this. It should add ID. Light source lists. Here I am doing what I was going to do, but this should not be a list of lists of list objects. This should be a list of hash set int. And we need to have 4 of these. It needs to be static light source list. And then there's dynamic light source hash set with an S. Static shadow source hash sets and dynamic shadow source hash sets. Oh. Okay. So the reason for that is to make it easier to just actually it might not make sense. Or no, I don't think this is needed. It was basically an idea to make it easier to just access the lists that it belongs to currently, or the hash sets that it belongs to currently. But I think that's not for the best. Can it divide by itself? Yeah. Okay, good. Now, the issue here is that this needs to run on move. So this needs to contain this needs to handle this using an old and a new position. Ugh. Basically, every time a light source moves, we need to check which areas it will become added to or removed from. I do not know if I am in the mental state to be able to do this right now, but we can try. Basically, we calculate all of this bullshit. But we also need the previous. Ooh. Yeah, we need to calculate the previous position and the current position. And if they don't match, or well, we can just check the position first, and if the position has moved, then we'll do one thing, otherwise we'll do the other.
But there is another issue, which is initialization. Damn. My butt hurts. But yes, there is another issue, which is initialization. Because how do you determine whether it's just standing still or needs to be initialized? Which is easy, just tool initialize. Initialize. Now we'll do this. Initialize equals false. Because basically it needs to be able to set things right away. And here we're updating the static light area buffer. This is actually kind of unneeded. Until we're at the end here. And then we're gonna say if any of this runs, then this is simply not finished right now. But yeah, and here we're also doing things that I shouldn't be doing, because I was getting concerned with, like, should I add, should I because we've got light areas like this, right? I think they're about this size, maybe. And then we have multiple of these. Like that. And then if we have an object here with a light, then if the object is moving here, for example, then this and this area will have this object's ID added to their hash sets. But then the second we move down here and we peek 1 pixel into this area, that means that this area will have, so now all 3 here have their hash sets included with this value. However, this one also, because it's treated like a square. And it's like, is it worth it to do like fucking directional checks to check does this fall within every single pixel that you move? Or should we just render from here to there? Because, or rather what I mean is, every time that we draw a pixel here, every single pixel that is drawn here needs to make a check against this light, right? But I think it's not that bad, because what will happen is that it does have to read the light, but it's not that big of a deal, because it can read the light's distance, and then it can just compare it to the distance, or it can read the light's magnitude, really, and then it just compares itself to the magnitude from there to there, or to the light source, and it's like, no, there's no point, because it's too far away, and then we just discard it. It still needs to make this check, and discard, and discard, and discard, for every pixel in this area, but that might be only like this. You know, it might only be that. But if there is a light here and the camera is like here, it will be the entire square is doing these checks. But I think what we'll do is we do it the easy way, where it's just square based, and then I can make the change later and see if it has any impact at all on frame rate. Just for science. So, how do we make this work then? So if direction, distance, this doesn't matter. We have new position. But here I'm using the directional stuff. Which, let's not do that. This is position min area, and then max area. So we just go through all of those. And then we'll say the same thing. Except these are gonna be called previous. And here in position test, we have a previous position. But this is kind of annoying and shit, I think, because... No, let's combine it. We can combine it. So here then we have area count, Z. So what we do is... we take the max and the min of the previous and the current position. And then in the loop, we'll say something like if the position is less than current and greater than previous, then we'll remove. And if it's greater, if the max is greater than, you know, I think the logic makes sense there. But holy shit, math. Oh, it's almost over though. I have to wake Kibbs up soon, if he's not still awake. Yep. I did also do some writing work before stream, so I am like at 4 hours now, I guess. I just know this will be even more annoying to get into. My god. Stop. At the start of the next stream. Combine current and previous areas into one big area. For loop. Check. Do less than and greater than checks for previous area and current areas. Remove from old hash sets, add to new. Actually, really simple logic. But I think we'll stop there. Maybe. I think that's it for my brain today. But we have cleaned up a shitload. The main controller has 4 errors, and most of them are left there on purpose. But there are still tons and tons and tons of errors left. There are some in object, but it's part of the light system. And there are gonna be a lot in the editor. But that's because the editor just needs to be pointed towards the world now. Because before, the main controller just contained the tile matrix. But now that's not the case. So all of the editor things really just need to have a... You see here it says controller. Here it needs to say world controller instead. And it just needs to be pointed in the right direction. And I think that's very, very quick work. Unless there's some annoying things going on there, but it should be basically that. It should be really simple. This will need a little bit of work, I think. Here we're doing something called a right buffer section. And that is what we've been reworking for the most part. It basically writes the tile snippet to the buffer, but I've turned it into a queue system now. So this will need to be written as a preview to the tile buffer every frame, I think. Which I think is still just some minor changes here. But there are a lot of editor functions, or a lot of editor scripts, unfortunately, and yeah. As you can see. Because what I also did was, before, the like base, like main, I guess, the main script was split into 2. There was the main one for the game, which it contains the renderer and everything. And then there was an editor as well. And they both inherited from a controller base script where like the rendering was done. So they both just kind of inherited the rendering. And that was so that I could render the world inside of a window in the editor for the prefab editor. But I've completely erased the editor. We no longer inherit, we only have main controller. So a lot of this is pointing towards controller, and it's looking for an editor. While now, instead, the editor is a class inside of the controller that is only created if it is flagged to have the editor, right? So that needs to be redirected, but as you can see, it's everywhere. Like every single thing that reads from the controller is an error here, and just here it's 233, but it's easy because there are no like real logic issues here, more or less. It just needs to be pointed in the right direction, which borderline is just like a Control F and replace all. Not quite, because some of these are now in the main controller and some of them are in the world controller. So it's not as simple. I do have to go through it a bit manually. Like here it says controller.tilematrix, for example, but that should be world controller. But yeah. Until next time, thanks for hanging. Have a good day. Bye-bye. Oh, hello, Ho-Ho. He said, what's up with the... See, whenever... Those things only show up down, because it's like this, right? I look at this one, and sometimes this is what Twitch is like. And then this one, the little watch streak thing, it doesn't show up here. So sometimes I miss those. I didn't see you there. But yeah. Take care. Bye-bye.